and welcome to the Healthy Half Hour podcast. We are your hosts, Richard and Karen Inslee.
The Healthy Half Hour podcast is your resource for all things healthy, and we will be discussing how to make nutrition, fitness and lifestyle choices work for you.
We will be sharing our own personal insights along with research gathered from working in the health and fitness industry for the past 10 years.
Our show is brought to you by the 7 Day Shred, which can be found at 7dayshred.com, and please feel free to visit our podcast website, which can be found at healthyhalfhourpodcast.com.
And now on to today's show.
Hi everybody, we're back.
Getting quite regular at this, aren't we?
Yeah.
Must have a lot of time on our hands.
Well, unfortunately, with the situation of things, which the whole situation right now kind of ties into today's podcast, but we're
trying to do that with podcasts at the minute, just tie things back to recently with just what's happening with the world in general.
And we normally start our podcasts off with a little bit of what's been happening in our life and what we've been doing, and unfortunately this week we had some really sad news that your dad passed away.
Yes, he's had COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, for some time, and
he was managing. He
in and out of hospital, and I mean any infection wasn't good for him, and he used to get infections in his lungs just purely because he couldn't clear the lungs because of the obstruction, and unfortunately, he's a victim of the COVID-19. He contracted the disease, we're assuming, on one hospital visit or at some point, we don't know. And he went into hospital again, and he was there for 4 days and basically, as far as we know, just succumbed to it because nobody could visit. Mom couldn't go, my family couldn't go, and we're just kind of, again, a little helpless being this far away. But as I pointed out to someone the other day, if you're 4 miles away or 4,000 miles away, it really doesn't seem to make much difference at the minute. Trying to comfort Mum as much as we can on the phone and just being as helpful as we can, whatever we can do. But just kind of sad that he spent his last few days in hospital, again, alone. But I'm sure the medical staff, the nursing staff were as helpful and as comforting as they could be, because, again, this is happening to hundreds of thousands of people across the planet. It's not just us, and we've just been kind of thrown into the loop of nothing's normal now. We haven't even got a normal family anymore because Dad's passed away and we not working, and you can't go out and the grocery stores are lining up. So things are just kind of piling up a little bit at the minute, and again, we're just trying to muddle through and do what we can. So,
and like say your dad, his COPD and his age were against him, unfortunately. And so we've got friends here in Winnipeg that were tested positive. We mentioned this, I think, on last week's podcast, and they've recovered. But when you've got a metabolic disorder, a medical condition, and age and other factors going on, sometimes your body just can't fight it. So, like you say, it's a very stressful time right now, but we're kind of numb, and like you say, you just feel useless, don't you?
Yeah, to a degree, that uselessness and helplessness. And again, this podcast are hopefully going to kind of tie it into, again, the situation of either a lot of people being at home or people having to go to work, and again, being not necessarily exposed to people, but there's always that chance of being exposed. And we're going to kind of look at one of the mental aspects of this, and we're going to kind of look at anxiety today as much as we can. Again, just what anxiety is, and kind of run through a few stats, and maybe gives you some thoughts. Again, some people suffer really badly with anxiety, and I know with the current situation going on, with there seemingly no end in sight, anxiety can be really an issue with this. So,
and I just want to clarify just the difference between depression and anxiety before we get into the podcast, because I deal with this with a lot of like my corporate clients and when I'm presenting on mental health education workshops. And so depression is when you're focused on things that have actually happened in the past, but anxiety is when you're focusing on things that actually haven't happened yet. And anxiety it's a little bit like stress, because stress is any real or imagined threat and your body's response to it. So anxiety is stressing you out because you're getting anxious about something that's not actually happened yet.
And the stress response, you can't help that in any way, shape or form. If somebody comes up behind you and shouts boo or claps their hands and you jump up, that jump and initial reaction to it is inbuilt in your system. But when you're stressing about things and overthinking things, that's when stress builds up, and that chronic stress can build up. And it's this kind of overthinking we're going to look at today.
And anxiety is a bit like the COVID-19. It's actually an epidemic. And anxiety is one of the most common mental health disorders in North America. And with what's going on worldwide right now, I'm sure the anxiety numbers are just being hit out of the park, because we are uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen. And then there's posts on Facebook, social media, or fake book, as we like to call it. And, there's like a lot of misinformation being posted out there, but people are actually taking this stuff as gospel. So it's actually increasing people's anxiety even more. And one of the articles that we were referring to saying, and obviously this was actually printed, maybe, I don't know.
Earlier this year.
Yeah, because it actually predicted that by 2020, and we're already in 2020, that 7 out of 10 individuals will actually be affected by anxiety. And as a school board trustee, I find it, I don't know what the words to describe it as, like heartbreaking that a lot of children are being diagnosed with depression, mental health issues, and a lot of kids are suffering with anxiety as well. I mean, especially now, the kids are getting very anxious because they can't understand why they can't go out and play with their friends. And it's nearly 1 in 3 adolescents that actually has anxiety disorders. And the teens, like in today's generation, I mean, the statistics for like suicide, like mental health issues, I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm never speechless, but it just,
Yeah. And I mean, from kind of like, say, the overthinking point of view, yeah, it's people do tend to overthink a lot of stuff. And again, statistically, like Karen says, they're growing all the time.
And the medical research suggests that like it's anywhere up to 90% of all illnesses and diseases that is actually stress related due to anxiety.
Mm-hmm. And that so again, like Karen said, our anxiety is not the fear, I guess, but overthinking things that can happen in the future to you. So I've had clients, and you talk to them, and you go to visit, and I had one lady, and she says, "Oh, it's snowing outside. Are you still coming? Are we still meeting?" And I said, "Yeah." And she ran through I don't know how many scenarios that could go wrong with me driving there in the snow. And I was just kind of blown away of how overactive her mind can be. And really, we only really have influence over us, and basically things that are out of our control, we shouldn't really be overthinking about. Easy to say, I know, but really within the world, there's 2 things. The things that you're doing and the things that are happening. So the things that you're doing, you've got control over directly. And I mean, the things that are happening, you may have some influence over them, but not a lot of those things. Again, it's kind of your actions and your experiences. So you can either go with the flow, or you can kind of worry about the flow and worry about what things are going to happen. So, for example, it's like a general election. You vote for a political party and the other party wins. I mean, what are you going to do? You can't do a lot about it. I mean, that's just how it is. You can try and overthink about what's going to happen to that political party and maybe what's going to happen to the country, the economy, and everything else. But again, overthinking those things, people get anxious about it because they can't seem to stop that overthinking. Again, like Karen says, this then leads to stress. And then so that stress ends up leading to more illnesses because, like we've said before, inflammation being the kind of root cause of all disease. Go on, sweetheart.
No, it's just that like you tapped into the stress aspect of it. And the more that we get anxious and increase like our anxiety levels, the higher our stress levels go up. And increased amounts of stress, long-term, chronic levels of stress obviously have an effect on your gut microbiome. And so if we're suffering with anxiety and anxiety attacks and worrying about things that we have like no control over and worrying about what can happen, it's going to increase those stress levels and it's actually making us sick. And potentially linking back to the COVID-19 situation right now, the more that you disrupt your gut microbiome through stress and worrying about things that, you can't really have any control over, then it's actually going to affect your gut microbiome. And guess where 75% of your immune system is?
I don't know. Where's 75%?
In your gut.
Holy cats. We've never mentioned that.
So people who are increasing their stress levels through anxiety attacks and through stressing and worrying over things that they don't have control over are depleting their immune system health. And I was actually reading something earlier from another medical professionals, and he was saying that like health can't be obtained from a doctor, a drug, a syringe or a scalpel, but health can only be achieved from your thoughts, your beliefs, your choices and your behaviors. And so health indirectly, like especially like beating COVID-19, if somebody is reasonably healthy without the metabolic issues and they get tested positive, then again, those thoughts, those beliefs, your choices, your behaviors ultimately could have like quite an impact on whether you fight it or whether it fights you and you succumb to it.
The overthinking of it, again, that overthinking kind of blurs the line between what's under people's control and what isn't. And again, when we start to worry about things, I mean, how often do you kind of lie in bed worrying about things that are going to happen tomorrow? I mean, like we've suggested before, a piece of paper by the side of the bed so you can write down anything you've got to kind of do tomorrow to stop that kind of overthinking.
I've run out of pieces of paper at the side of my bed.
Oh, no, I don't. You get up and do something, get back in, get up and do something.
I do.
One of the big misunderstandings about this thing is that people think the act of worrying is basically not under their control. So they think that they worry, and they've got no control about how much they worry. To be honest, we all worry, but some of us worry too much. And it's the people that worry too much don't realize that they can actually stop worrying. They can actually put it to the back of their minds. And like people, I almost said normal people then, but I mean, that doesn't really...
Is there anybody normal
Well, that's
right
the
now?
thing. Well, people who don't over worry then, should I say, or don't overthink it, can kind of reconcile with themselves that, oh, okay, I'll either make a note of it or I'll think about this tomorrow because now is bedtime. So I need to go to sleep. So I'm not going to worry about it. I have control over what I think about. I have voluntary control over that. Like we were saying earlier on with the stress response, you've got no control over that the initial stress response. But after that, you've got as much control as you want, really, to how not to overly worry about these things. And I mean, people are probably listening saying, well, that's a load of rubbish. How can I stop worrying? It's obviously something you've got to train yourself into. It's something you've got to practice, because if you're already a worrier and you've already suffered with bad anxiety, then again, these worries that you've got, it's something that you've got to kind of convince yourself that it is a voluntary response.
And also, we've touched on this before when it comes to anxiety and stress. And a lot of it is actually relative to mindset, and changing your mindset about the stress and the anxiety will actually help you to helps like how you will deal with the anxiety attacks and like the stress in the process. So like have a look at your thoughts, your beliefs, what's happening, and like does these anxious and stressful thoughts, does it motivate you? Like does it exhaust you? Does it completely paralyze you? Do you view it differently? Do you view it like differently about yourself? And one of the things that I've seen a lot in the corporate world is sometimes people use others' stress as an invite for and the other person to vent about their own stress. So somebody will be very stressed and anxious about a topic, and then the other person will go, oh my goodness, yeah, but like I've got this going on, I've got that going on. And it's almost like people compete to see who has the most stressful life out there. And one of the things that you need to address is, not avoiding that anxiety or that stress, but to change the way that you think about it. Like, can you connect any positives behind that stress, and what's at stake if you don't deal with it? And it's not a case of trying to get rid of it, but managing it in a way that you recognize it and recognize those triggers. And I've got clients who suffer from panic attacks and anxiety attacks, and it's probably we were talking about it earlier, it was probably a year ago, 18 months ago, that I actually had my very first and hopefully my last anxiety attack. I actually woke you up in the early hours of the morning because I actually thought that you were going to have to take me to the emergency because I was having a heart attack. And I know that when people go to other professionals and they say, oh yeah, I went to see this counsellor because they've got all these certificates on the wall, and from an academic perspective, yes, they probably know a lot of information, but we always like to say, like, unless you've actually experienced the situation, then I personally, you cannot completely understand what that other person is going through. And I've got clients, as I said, who suffer from anxiety attacks, and and I did understand it. Yes, I have a lot of, I have certificates, I have academic qualifications, but after having that anxiety attack, I'm like, oh my goodness, I can so relate, like on a completely different level now with my clients. And at the time, it was when not long after my mum and my stepdad had been taken into the nursing home. My stepdad's health was deteriorating, and obviously people who will be following us for quite a while know that my stepdad passed away at the end of September, and my business was suffering through all of this. And you kind of worry about money, and then I was just so anxious and worried and that anxiety attack was basically driven from me worrying about not the situation that was happening to me, but what if?
So again, just kind of circling back around with what we've just been saying, it's, again, trying to go with the flow a little bit more. Like you say, don't be passive. Don't just kind of roll over. If you've got something to say or you've got some input, by all means do that. And if it will help influence the outcome for the better of everybody, then again, but don't be, people just sit and complain on, especially social media. It's just whine about a lot of stuff. But again, you kind of got to go with the flow a little bit and then kind of work from going with the flow. I heard an analogy a while ago. It's I think it comes from a long time ago because I was listening to I've been reading quite a little bit with the Stoics recently. And the analogy was the guy owns a cart when his horse pulls the cart and he's got a new dog. So he ties the dog to the cart to take the dog along. And the dog pulls and doesn't want to go. And basically the dog's just wasting his time because they're all going to go in the same direction. So until the dog learns to go with the flow, and then life will get a little bit easier. So, that's kind of, looking for that easier ride, just going with the flow. But like I say, the dog, you know, he'd be dragging his butt along the floor and he'll hate every minute of it. But if he goes with the flow, that gives you time to think about other things and then maybe, you know, influence things in a better way rather than just fighting them all the time.
And going back to that mindset and like how you handle stress as a result of increased anxiety levels. And basically we should be chasing after, instead of trying to avoid that stress, like I said, like we should be chasing after meaning, because it's like better for your health and trying to avoid the discomfort that the stress might cause. So like, you know, this is the best way to make decisions about your life and your health, and go after what creates meaning in your life, and trust yourself that whatever decisions that you make, the potential stress that might follow, you trust yourself to be able to handle that stress as a result of the decision. So instead of avoiding the discomfort of that stress and that anxiety, and again, utilizing professionals and counseling and reaching out to people. So if you recognize those triggers, like it could be very, like you say, there could be a lot of discomfort there as a result of those anxiety attacks, and the stress levels are like increasing even more. But if you have the right mindset and you know how to recognize the triggers and reach out to somebody that you can talk it through with, whether it's over the phone, in person. Obviously, in person right now is a bit of a challenge for anything. I mean, video calls are okay. But basically just reach out and don't let like the anxiety take control of you. You take control of it where you can.
And I think that's probably the underlying message of today is, like you say, just try and take a little bit more control over, again, your thoughts. We can only control so much in our lives, but letting our thoughts run away with us, that things are my control. And again, we've all had those times where something's on your mind and you can't get that out. But again, maybe just take a kind of a bit of a step back, think what's in your control, what's not in your control, what you can influence, and kind of think about it from that angle. Maybe a little bit more, I was going to say practical, but that's probably not another good word either. I'm just short of good words today. But
it's been a tough week.
Yeah, so. It has been a tough week, but onward and upward, we will kind of move forward, and hopefully everybody's doing okay, and we will talk to you next time.
That's all we have time for right now, but we do hope that you join us for our next show. And if you want to contribute to an upcoming show by suggesting a topic that you would like us to discuss in more detail, then hop over to our website, healthyhalfhourpodcast.com, subscribe to our podcast and submit your suggestions. The Healthy Half Hour Podcast was brought to you by the 7 Day Shred, and don't forget to share our details with your friends and review our show. Until next time, thanks for listening.